All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the November 15th, 2023 Technical Review Committee meeting. My name is Ryan Fisher. I'm a senior planner with Oldham County Planning and Development. The purpose of the Technical Review Committee meeting is to review proposed subdivisions, zoning map amendments, and development plans before they go to the Planning Commission. This gives local agencies and utility companies represented here in front of you today, those that will provide services, the opportunity to review plans, discuss and comment about the accessibility of services, and ensure all aspects of the development plans adhere to zoning and subdivision regulations. This meeting also provides adjoining property owners and concerned citizens in attendance the opportunity to ask technical questions of the applicants or agencies that are represented here before you. So we have two cases on the agenda today. The first one, 23-013, the Family Entertainment Center on North Highway 393. And then the second case will be 23-014 for a proposed Christian Brothers Automotive on South Highway 53. So both of these cases will run the same way. The first will have the applicant or their legal counsel come forward and give just a brief overview of the project. We'll then have agency comments from those agencies that are represented here in the front. And then lastly, we'll have public comment, anybody from the public that would like to comment about the project. We just try to ask at Technical Review Committee that those questions remain technical in nature of either the applicant or the agencies that are represented here before you. So with that being said, we'll start with our first case, and that is 21-013, the proposed Family Entertainment Center, the 1100 block of North Highway 393.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
For those of you who don't know me at this point, and this is most everybody, my name is Mike Swansburg. I'm with the law firm of Swansburg and Smith, located 117 West Main Street here in LaGrange. I'm not going to add the additional details that I usually do because I've been made fun of in the past for that, so I figured I'd go ahead and skip that part and just make sure you get my address for the record. Good to see everybody here. Glad to, it's been a while since I've actually been in front of this particular group, so I'm glad to have an opportunity to talk with you all about this project, which quite frankly, I actually think this is one of the cooler projects, one of the neater projects that I've personally been a part of and been in front of you all for, which is this Family Entertainment Center concept that we've got, that we've had applied for. In addition to myself, I've got Carl Lentz here, who is the engineer on the project. He's going to give you the technical discussion points because I'm a lawyer and we don't do that very well. And so I'm going to make sure that Mr. Lentz has an opportunity to get up here and answer any questions that you guys might have about any technical issues or other questions that have come up, even as recently as this morning on behalf of the Transportation Cabinet. So the question I guess to go ahead and ask you, I don't get the benefit necessarily of having the usual, here's what we want to do, but of course the application we've got is on behalf of GIMP Enterprises, LLC. That is the owner/developer in this case. It is a 2-acre spot over in Buckner, located off of 393, just south, if you will, across the street, just south of Oldham County High School. It is a part of the property that used to be part of the Clayton and Lambert industrial site that everybody sees on 146 when they go by. And obviously at this point is either there's some work being done in the context of preparation for road construction or the industrial site that otherwise sits basically vacant for the rest of us that are watching it every single day. The entertainment center that we're talking about, just for everyone's benefit. So what is the entertainment center, right? Because that's the $1 million question, I suspect, that everyone's asking at this point. It's actually a multi-use concept. And there are 2 buildings on the site at this point that are proposed to be on the site, one of which is going to be, or is proposed to be, a brewery/brew house for individuals to purchase and consume alcohol. The second building, the Family Entertainment Center, the one that you actually think of, generally speaking, is going to be very much like you think of. The best way I can describe it is going to be a place like Main Event, for example, in Louisville, but not quite to the same scale that we're talking about, not quite as big. And you're going to have things like indoor bowling, for example. There may be arcade games. The reality of it, if I'm going to be perfectly frank with you, is that there is concepts along those lines that the developer is talking about, but what we really want to do actually is try to get input from the community about what they might think would be the most fun component of that. So, for example, if it's Golden Tee, for those of you who like to play Golden Tee, they want to see those kind of things in there. The developer is actually pretty open to the idea of getting community input on what some of those concepts might be. But when you think about the Family Entertainment Center in this context, it really is a mixed use of, again, what you might think of in a big entertainment center where you have, again, bowling, you have arcade games, you might have ping pong, you might have other types of games, ring toss, those kind of things. I'm just thinking out loud about various entertainment-esque concepts that you might see somewhere. In between the two, of course, would be a shared space in the back, and that would actually be an open kind of garden-esque concept where people can go back and forth and utilize both buildings in that context to the extent they're legally allowed to do so. Let me make sure I clarify that. Obviously, minors aren't going to be buying alcohol, but there will be that shared space in the back. There is one other component to it that has been discussed, and it's on the, if you want to look at the proposal, it's actually the north side of the building. There's a small turnaround or roundabout there, and the discussion on that point is potentially to have a drive-through coffee concept so that in the morning, if you are on your way to work, on your way to school, you can actually drive into it. There will be a drive-through window on that northern part that you all are looking at, and then head on out and go about your day when you are done with that process. And so, again, it's when we talk about this mixed-use entertainment center, it's what you guys are looking at. It's there's a whole host of ideas on this front, but that is conceptually what we are talking about being developed at this point. In the interim, of course, we're asking the county and the various steps to approve a zoning map amendment. It is currently zoned as I-2. That takes into account, obviously, the residual or historical use by the Clayton and Lambert manufacturing facility. But that 2+ acres that we are talking about, we're asking the zoning map to be amended to read C3. My understanding is that, and I was not a part of that myself, but there was an initial discussion between the developer and Planning Commission staff to just kind of talk about this in a very generic sense, and that was one of the outcomes of the discussion was that proposed request to a C3 zoning map change. So again, not a whole lot else for me to necessarily get into on my end. I did want to open this up from at least from our perspective, from a collaborative stance, to just kind of hear what you all have to think about, and if there are any issues other than those we've already heard to this point that we can either address or that may come up in some sense that we can get feedback from you all as well. And so I'm not going to belabor too much more time for you all other than to say that's my initial presentation for this, and be happy to answer any questions and or provide additional information as you all see fit.
All right, thank you. Did you have anything you wanted to add before we moved on to agency comments? Or?
No, sir, but there's a representative.
Oh, so actually, surprise guest. We have not met yet. So Adam McIntyre is my contact, but did you have anything else you want to add on behalf of the developer?
No, you summed it up.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on to agency comments. I will begin on behalf of Planning and Development, and I do have written comments that I'll provide you at the conclusion if you make sure you pick them up. So the first one is the existing zoning is I-2, like you stated on the plans. You all have it as I-1, so you'll need to make sure you change that. Note the location and size of all existing proposed water mains, any sanitary sewer hookup, gas lines, fire hydrants, electric, telephone poles, or underground wires. Include any substantial existing trees, their type and size, and whether they are to be removed. I don't think there are. There's one little patch of trees on that property, but I don't know the size of those. And then a separate detailed landscape and lighting plan will be required, at the time of construction plan review and approval. And I did on the letter just note a few things. Our ILA requirements require a minimum of 1 island every 10 spaces. And so there's a couple places on your plan that show 14 spaces. So that'll need to be changed. We want to ensure any screening requirements that are located in section 300-090 for service structures, including those dumpsters and things are included on that plan. And then because the VUA is greater than 12,000, that landscape plan will be required to be prepared and signed by a Kentucky certified landscape architect. And then as far as the parking spaces go, I know on the plans it lists to be determined by the planning director, with it being mixed use. That'll really be dependent upon the use, all the different uses, and then part of our parking requirements deal with like how many bowling lanes, how many tees. I know we've talked mini golf, so it'll be dependent on those uses once we figure out what those will be. And then I guess one other note I don't have on the letter, because I guess I didn't realize initially that that drive-through was for coffee, but we just need to make sure that there's enough queuing space there, and then also room for a bypass lane that's required out of our standards. So we'll have to look at that a little bit more in depth. I will provide you comments as well from the health department. He's unable to be here today because he's out in the field. He just wanted me to make sure you knew, because food service or anything, to get with the health department regarding that. And that was going to be his only comment. I also sent to you all today, to Adam and then also to Mr. Swansburg, the letter from KYTC just regarding the nearby highway design project. So I've got his email in written form, as well as that transportation project as well, to provide you at the conclusion. With that, we'll go down to Jim Sullivan, our county engineer.
I'm going to actually go over some comments and get out of order on the letter that will be provided to you with our review comments, because I want to come back to the traffic study and traffic generation with some question and answers. But you've done work with the county, so you're aware of our stormwater quality management erosion control permit. You'll be required to get that since this is greater than an acre. Also, the KYR 10 permit from the Kentucky Division of Water. We do have the typical requirements with that design process. No discharge within 15 feet of the property line on that basin. I know this is preliminary, so future submittals should show the spillway location and other details. I'm not going to get into all these. They're included in the
We
letter.
may do something underground too, just depends.
Okay,
Right.
and that's acceptable. You'll need to also address the water quality requirements within that ordinance. So then when we talk about the trip generation, and subsequent to receipt of that email from KYTC, I did have an opportunity to talk to Jason Richardson, and he and I had some other questions. Some of them you've kind of answered a little bit with the presentation. We were wondering what that roundabout or drive-through was, and you've said it's a coffee, potentially a coffee station. When we look at this, depending on what trip generation number you use, it appears to be over the 100 trips generated for a peak hour, which is the threshold for KYTC needing a traffic impact study. However, based on what we've heard now, that some of it might be a brewery, some might be for games, some might be for coffee house, we really are going to need to have a breakdown of the areas of those individual uses so we can further determine that. The other factor that comes into this is with the realignment of 393, we know that existing 393 is probably going to be used more for school traffic and buses. So when we start looking at the peak hour trip generation, what are your actual hours of operation? When are your peak hours going to be? Or is it weekends and evening? And then that's not affecting bus traffic. So if you could start getting some of this information to us, then we can coordinate with KYTC on whether or not they're going to require a traffic impact study.
Okay.
So,
Okay, great. Thank
okay. This is all included in that letter. And
you. Awesome, thank you.
Matt?
I mean, as far as addressing go, we'll just issue a separate number for each one of these buildings.
Okay.
Just to keep,
Separate
especially
addresses.
if, with the ABC licensing and all that kind of stuff, we'll just have it be separate.
Great,
But that's the only comment I have.
okay.
Keith Smith, LaGrange Fire and Rescue Department. I briefly looked over the drawings that I had, and we'll just need to say there may be a possibility of a hydrant
Yes, sir.
over nearby that property. I'm going to assume those buildings are probably not going to be sprinkled or,
Right, no, they won't be, since they're under 10,000.
I knew they were under the square footage. Sometimes people go ahead and do it. And then we would also, the fire department would require a Knox box to be installed on each of the buildings there. That's really all I've got.
All right, so that concludes agency comments. Once again, just make sure you pick up these documents there that have been provided. At this point, we'll open it up for public comment. If there's anybody in the audience that has any questions that are technical in nature of either the applicant or agencies represented, I'll give you all the opportunity. Seeing none, do you want to say anything else? You look like you were getting up there.
Question from Matt, if possible.
Okay.
Because it prompted, the discussion about the address has prompted me, man, I know. So on the application itself and looking at the map online, identified parcels 30-19 and 31-00-6B. Those were the existing Clayton and Lambert. I know it has since been parceled off, but I just didn't know at some point, I know you guys worked through to put those on the map and update them, but do you want me we can just work with you all to figure out if there was a new one? I just want to make sure the information's correct on that parcel itself.
The parcel number is assigned by the PVA.
Okay.
So even though the shapes might not be on like the GIS map, that doesn't mean that this still didn't get recorded and is still a valid parcel. But they're the ones who you're going to have to go to get the latency that they have on minor plats like this is, it could be soon, it could be 6 months from now. And like, since they're doing the tax, like the tax roll and the bills right now, they sort of put all some of these minor plats to the side. But as long as it's recorded in the deed room, you'll be fine.
Right. And we had just worked on some in the past, and I just didn't know if there was any particular request. But what we'll do, if everyone's okay, is we'll still identify it as the existing parcels in any applications or discussion until such time as a map changes on that front. But I just wanted to make sure that was.
Yeah.
For the purposes of your application, you're fine. And then the address comes later and the tax parcel number, and that'll just catch up with you eventually.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. So with that, you all have until the 22nd if you do choose to go, forward to the Planning Commission. Our filing deadline is the 22nd of this month. And that will conclude that one. If you do happen to be in the crowd or you're watching online, if you were notified as an adjoining property owner of this hearing, if they do choose to go forward, you will be notified of any subsequent hearings. They go forth to the Planning Commission in the next step. So with that, we will move to the next case, 23-014. It's for proposed Christian Brothers Automotive at 2107 South Highway 53. Start with Mr. Talbot.
Good afternoon, everybody. John Talbot, 1000 North Hurstbourne Parkway, Louisville, Kentucky, 40223. I'm at the firm of Barden, Warper, Talbot, and Roberts. This is a case for Christian Brothers Automotive. We have with us today, we have Paula Tolliver from Houston, yes, it is Houston. Houston from Christian Brothers, and we also have Ashley Zabel, I think I got that right, and she's with the Land Planning Engineering Company, Progressive AE, is that right? And she'll be here to answer a lot of the technical questions. I have several slides here. I don't necessarily think we need to go through them with really a lot of detail. What this is going to be a Class A automobile repair shop. Really what they're going to be doing is more like scheduled maintenance type items, oil changes, flushes of power steering fluid, changing tires, that sort of thing. Paula can probably comment on their typical competitors, but I would think that Ken Towery, Big O Tires, Michael Tire, places like that do a wide range of automobile work, primarily, again, kind of the maintenance type work, not an auto body type operation so much, is really what their the main target of their business model is. They will have 9 bays at this site, and they've had several, I think they've got 260 plus facilities nationwide. And they entered this market, I guess, in the last year or two. And so they're relatively new to this market, but they've got several now in the greater Louisville market, which some in Indiana, and now they want to get one in Oldham County. And I think there's one in Crestwood too, is that right? So you do have one close by if you all wanted to see what they're like. But we have a picture of the rendering, and you'll see that it's a very, very sharp looking building. We also have a couple of variances that we're going to be requesting on this as well for setbacks. And the way the property is set up, and we're trying to position the building so it really does not have, so people on the residential side are not looking at the bay doors. The bay doors are all facing the more commercial side. The way we were trying to address those concerns and the way the lot is set up, we really needed to, we hopefully can get some relief on some of those matters with setbacks. The zoning would go from C1 to C2. You can see the site directly in the middle of the screen. Obviously, this is an area that has grown up a lot in the last 10 years. And this is a further extension of going down Highway 153. You've got, this shows kind of a lot of the businesses in that area, which I know you all are very familiar with, and our lot is in the red on the outside. This is a little bit of a zoomed in version. You also can see the residences to the kind of the northwest of us, and there's I don't know, a pond or kind of a small lake back there behind us with some of those residences. This is the site as it looks today. We've got 153 on the left and Zale Smith Road on the right, and our entrance would be on Zale Smith Road. With the proximity of our location to the intersection, we really need to have our entrance on that road so it doesn't interfere with the intersection on 153. These are pictures of the site as well that I'll flip through pretty quickly. And here's our development plan. Ashley, do you want to get up and give any details about the development plan? It's fairly straightforward. I mean, it's got a building and parking spaces primarily, but she might be able to touch on some of the details about it as well.
Pretty straightforward. Ashley Zabel with Progressive AE, 1811 4 Mile Road Northeast in Grand Rapids, Michigan. A little bit of a drive.
Welcome.
So as you can see, right off of Zale Smith Road is where the proposed building will be. And as John had stated, we've got the service bays facing towards O'Reilly's. I believe it's been understood that we've been in discussion with O'Reilly's for this development. And I think it's pretty neat that you can kind of just coordinate with them where it's like, hey, you need parts while you're at it? It's right next door. And so we have the shared drive on the, trying to take a look at which side we're on, but on the back side of the O'Reilly's building. And our detention is proposed there just on the, can't quite see my north arrow where I'm working with here, but further along Zale Smith Road, which aligns with the existing contours of the site. We're putting Christian Brothers on the high point and it all naturally flows into that direction. And then once it is detained and we meet the stormwater requirements for the development, it would then go in through the existing outlet.
Thank you very much. One thing I should add about Ashley, in addition to making a long drive, she's headed Red River Gorge after this. So,
Yes,
so she's taking advantage of her trip to Kentucky.
one of my favorite places in the world.
This is the landscape plan. It really all looks almost the same, but it gives a little bit of a colored up version where you can identify where the detention is to the east, and then the parking lot and the building in red. And here is what our building is going to look like. The top picture with the bay doors, that's what will face north into O'Reilly's. The middle picture, that's what will face Zale Smith Road. And so they've dressed up that facade a little bit to look nicer as you come up the road, and then you've got the side pictures as well. So that's basically it. We look forward, we welcome your all's questions, and thank you very much for your all's time today.
Great. Thank you. So with that, we'll let Mr. Urban, I believe, is going to handle the comments from Planning and Development.
Sure. Brian Fogel, the Assistant Director, has reviewed the plan, and these are his comments, and I think Johnny already gave you a copy of this, but
He did. Thank you very much.
So upon receipt of the notification of the November 15th Technical Review Committee meeting, the Transportation Cabinet emailed our office to state permit will not be required from the Transportation Cabinet. There's no access to a state route, and that there's an email in the back of that he's attached. Provide a sign-in sheet and statement detailing issues raised at the Thursday, October 26, 2023 neighborhood meeting. I'm not sure if that's been
That
submitted
should have been-
separately.
I
but-
think that's been turned in already, but maybe not when he'd prepared
I
it.
thought it might have been after he did these comments. Incorporate supporting evidence to demonstrate the appropriateness for a C2 zoning map amendment and associated development plan request in accordance with Section 380.010, and I know you'll do that when you submit your application for the zoning map amendment and development plan. Provide location and ownership of all adjoining properties on the development plan. I think there was a few missing, but I know that you have them. Indicate the provision of 9 service bay parking spaces to reflect a total number of 51 parking spaces. We do allow the bays to actually count towards parking. And you got to put that on the development plan. So change the nomenclature from 42 to 51 altogether. Provide building elevation details, monument sign details, dumpster enclosure details, and any other building and/or structural details when submitting a zoning map amendment application. I want to pause at this point and say I really appreciate the design team and Christian Brothers on behalf of the city of LaGrange, even though this isn't in the city, it's at the entrance to the city. And the back of the building, which would have been all brick, which was nice, they did reflect some changes in it that I think make a really significant difference in breaking up a long wall. And they always do, I know, build a top-notch facility, so I appreciate that. Individually list and note any requested variances from the zoning ordinances, development standards, and he's got a couple, there's a variance from the minimum 35-foot street side yard setback along Zale Smith Road with the proposed 10-foot street side yard setback. I think we need to talk about that. You said that you knew that there were variances, to make sure we get them all, and that there's a variance from the minimum 10-foot wide vehicular use landscape buffer area along O'Reilly's common property line with a proposed 4-foot, 4-inch wide vehicle use landscape buffer area. It's a lot of talk. Section 300.050 landscape buffer area plantings. And it's a preliminary list. We've done a pretty thorough review, but there might be other comments later.
Okay, thank you.
Jim Silliman, County Engineer. This is a little bit more detailed set of plans than we normally get for TRC, so there's, similar to the docket before, there's a handful of very detailed items that I'll just let you get with the letter, having to do with some of the detention requirements and the other stormwater, but some of them that we do want to talk about. Of course, since this is greater than an acre, you will be required to get the stormwater quality management and erosion control permit through the county and also the KYR 10 from the state. We discussed that it doesn't encroach on the state, so there's no state encroachment permit required unless there are going to be improvements within their right-of-way. We had previous emailed correspondence with regard to traffic impact, and based on the minimal or low trip generation and also future improvements to Kentucky Highway 53, there's neither a traffic assessment nor a traffic impact study required. For the detention basin, we will require that an easement be placed around that basin and recorded with the Oldham County Clerk. You can have that done anytime before we need to release the surety for erosion control during construction. So it's easier if you get it done earlier, but it just needs to be done by that point. Let's see. So it does appear that some of the parking lot drainage could cross over to O'Reilly's. So on the markup plans that will be provided to you, we drew some catch basins in the radii to potentially catch some of that water and keep it on site. You'll need to show how the water quality treatment is being addressed in future plan submittals in accordance with our ordinance. And also, we usually recommend that you utilize KYTC's entrance permit standard drawing for that entrance to accommodate large trucks for those radii. And that is all I have.
The only comment I would have is I'm fine with you using that 2107, but the way that this building is oriented on the site, I'd like to have that be posted on the office and at least have the number on the sign, if not all of South 53, just because you're never going to be able to see, since like the way that the building is, you wouldn't want to put it on that brick on the side that just faces 53. So I'd at least put the number on the office as well as just the number on the sign, or if you wanted to have it be saying 2107 South Highway 53.
Yeah, that won't be a problem.
Just for 911 purposes. But other than that, I don't have any comments.
As far as the fire department goes, let's say we'll require a Knox box attached to the property. And may or may not, after I do a little drawing, may look to see about a hydrant in around that area. I can't answer that right this second, but I'll be in touch and I'll with you after talking to the water department.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I
So,
just got one other thing that Jim just brought to my attention. There's a cross-access easement that needs to be part of that connection with O'Reilly's. Right.
Very good.
all right, so that concludes agency comments. Now open it up to the public. If there's anybody in the audience that would like to come forward and ask questions that are technical in nature.
Hello. I'm Jim Allen. I am the president of Crystal Lake Club Association, and I'm also a neighbor of that backyard there. And I've submitted a letter that we put together very quickly, so my apologies for not getting to you all sooner. But we had a board meeting of the night, and there's been a bunch of people in the committee, in the club, that actually have experience with things like Valvoline Auto Repair Services and other repair shops. And so we've listed the questions here. Some of them Mr. Sloman's already responded to and other board members have, but I kind of like to go through the remaining ones and see if I can get some clarification, or at least put them on the table for clarification later. First of all, with respect to, this is not in the letter, let me cover those first. With respect to the traffic management in this area, what's happening, just so you know, what's happening here is that the people coming down Zale Smith are now starting to use the back road for O'Reilly's as a way of circumventing the tie-ups that we get when people come down 53 and try and turn left across traffic into Kroger's. And it's getting more and more traffic. And this is just going to exacerbate that problem. But I don't know whether there's a way to measure that or to see how to manage that. But it's getting to the point where now, if I do it, I got to wait in line for the guy in front of me in O'Reilly's to turn right. So I keep hearing these things about the traffic studies. I don't get the sense that they're actually representing the reality for the people that live there. But I just wanted to mention that, okay? The other thing I wanted to mention with regard to the discussion we just had is the easement for the drainage, the detention pond. One of the problems I think we had with O'Reilly's was that the detention pond was eased, but it was unincorporated, so nobody really owned it. Will the applicant still own the property that the easement will ease?
Well, that one was unique because it was a multi-parcel development, and that has been resolved since with Goodwill Development. This is kind of on its own, even though it's in that area, it's on its own, and so they would get a stormwater management agreement when they submit that easement document.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and this has always been its own parcel. It was never associated with any of the other
Yeah.
three that were part of O'Reilly's and another development coming
Right,
forward.
right. I just want to make sure we're not doing the same thing we did last time, and I'm not smart enough to know that without asking these questions. That's been a long process, that one. Okay, so the nature of the questions that I have are more related to the water quality management aspects of it, and Mr. Silman's already addressed some of those concerns. But the people that in the club that have been managing facilities like this before called our attention to the unintentional stormwater pollution that happens. I've given some examples here. For example, when the bays are cleaned out, the stuff gets pushed into the driveway, and that stuff then ends up in the stormwater system and ends up in our lake. Now, the reason why this lake, we prefer to think of it as a lake, not a pond, but we've got, it would cost us about $97,000 to replace the fish in that pond. So we're very, very interested in making sure that there aren't things like antifreeze that inadvertently get pushed into that culvert, because it's only a few hundred feet from where I actually live. And that's something I don't know how we actually prevent that from happening, but maybe has there been consideration given to a special kind of drain in front of the bays, or some way of managing so that the runoff on that parking lot doesn't end up in our stormwater system?
I mean, we haven't discussed that detail yet, other than I mentioned we've got our water quality standards, but they can maybe answer your question better as to what measures they could potentially put in place or have already thought about putting in place.
Okay. So could you clarify perhaps a generic process for which if we get a big fish kill-off or something like that, how would we go about getting, since this is okayed and permitted by the county, how do we go about getting a remedy for that? Is it something that we would do with the owners of the property, or? Something
Yes,
to take up with legal, right?
you're coming up with a hypothetical that's
Yeah.
not happened yet,
Yeah.
and we'd have to go through code enforcement and investigative procedures,
Yeah,
just
I
like
think
any
it's-
other.
I think it's-
But is that going to happen? I don't know.
I don't know. That's the answer to the question, is through code enforcement. I think that would help.
Well, code enforcement isn't the answer to every problem, because we only have limited
I understand.
kind of jurisdiction and ability to pursue some kind of remedy, but the question in your hypothetical question comes, well, where did it come from?
Right.
And there are other parking lots that also drain ultimately into the lake.
That's right. Well, this one,
And so how do you identify its point source? And
this one is very easy to do, because the culvert goes right into that,
understood.
Okay.
But again,
okay.
hypothetical question and hypothetical answer.
I'll try and be a little more technically oriented and more specific here.
Yeah.
One of the things we'd like to know more about would be the plan for storing parts and trash and stuff like that. One of the things that we see in our code enforcement pictures that we get all the time, where you'll have a big dumpster and it'll be leaking stuff out onto the road, and we'll get a illicit discharge kind of complaint. Since this particular facility is uniquely, well, because it's an automotive, capable of producing all kinds of hazardous materials and fluids, are you guys going to do something special that would contain this stuff? Like, are your dumpsters going to be like fluid-proof or leak-proof or that kind of thing? Is that possible?
When you're done, we'll come up and
Okay.
try to address all of it.
Okay. And then, in addition to that, one of the things that we notice quite often is people dumping junk into these culverts. We have a group of very dedicated neighbors that go pick junk up out of this empty lot already, and it includes pretty much everything you can think of. So we're kind of sensitive to the possibility that people will be using this site as a place to dump tires and toxic materials. So if you have any plans that would cover how we might mitigate that, work together as a community, that would be very appreciated, because it's already kind of a problem to us. The other thing, do you guys anticipate any truck traffic coming in here? Like, we expect that you'll have a tow truck with a vehicle behind it, but you're not expecting semi-trucks? Okay, that's good. And again, these questions are primarily related to the environmental questions that we have, because Curry's Creek is a blue stream, and we're very, very sensitive in trying to make sure that we don't have a problem with it. And we like to do as much as we can to stem those possibilities now, even though sometimes they're speculative, so that we don't have to deal with them in the future. So any additional thoughts you might have are very, very appreciated. Okay? Any questions?
Mr. Allen, before you step away, she just needs your address for the record, please.
1416 Oldham View Drive.
Okay, thanks.
So before you start your answer, I want to put a context on Mr. Allen's comments. Of course, he lives right next door, but he's also the president of the Crystal Lake Club. We know him real well because there have been incidents where off-site drainage has had an impact on the lake. And that's, when you laser focused on the environmental side, that's why. So,
That's understandable.
yeah.
Well, and I'll add to that also, he referenced Curry's Creek. Curry's Fork is a already impaired watershed, and we have a watershed plan in place and coordinator that works on measures to improve the water quality. So it's kind of, again, under a microscope already.
Yeah.
Understood. So
And you'll, just state your name and
Yeah.
address for the record. Thanks.
Paula Tolliver, Christian Brothers Automotive, address 17725 Katy Freeway, Houston, Texas 77094.
A little bit farther drive than Michigan.
Yeah, doesn't help with delayed flights too. So, so to answer a couple of Jim's concerns regarding the environmental. So we do use a double wall above ground containers that house our old and our new fluids. So the other issue is, in which we do hire a environmental company that disposes of those chemicals. As a fail-safe protection, we do install a 750-gallon oil inceptor that exceeds the total volume of any facility with that house environmental fluids. So that way it's not getting into the systems, there's that inceptor, and a company will come out and dispose of that. As far as the tires go, we don't get a whole lot of services where we're not like a discount tire. I don't know if y'all have that here in Kentucky, but they're only on a as-needed basis. So when they do come, we'll get them from a third party, install them, and then they'll immediately take them out and dispose of them. So we don't have tires or anything like that just stacked and around the dumpster. Our dumpster is enclosed, so there won't be any outside storage in that nature. Does that answer your questions?
Can I add to that question?
Sure.
Thanks, I remember to use the mic. Thank you, I appreciate that very much. Can you comment, we're familiar with oil separators and things like that. One of the things we're concerned about are the toxic chemicals like the antifreeze, which is dissolvable in water, obviously, and then gets through the system. It doesn't float, it just permeates the system, gets into the lake. Is there any way to trap that stuff? That's probably a more likely fluid than gas and oil, I would think.
That actually, the oil-water interceptor.
You'll want to come up to the mic, please.
The oil-water interceptor then goes to the sanitary system. It doesn't go to the detention system. So,
Is there any kind of detention, any kind of separator in the detention system?
so the detention system is just the building itself, and the work that's being done in the building is going through those floor drains, which is going through the interceptor, which is going to sanitary.
Okay, got it.
So all of that is being contained. Our intention would be roof, parking, and green space is what's going to be going to the detention basin.
So one of the concerns that was expressed in our meeting was, do you have a way of preventing repairs being done in a parking lot? Or when a car gets towed in and it's leaking because it's broken? I mean, that stuff gets into the parking area and then ends up in the detention pond. That's our concern. I was in the impression there was going to be a separator actually in the detention pond like O'Reilly's has. And O'Reilly doesn't even have the fluids that you guys have, right? So what can be done in the actual detention area to prevent all that runoff that might be there from eventually getting into the stormwater system? The stuff that's going in the sewer is okay, I'm okay with that.
Would it be helpful to start by explaining Christian Brothers' concept
I get the concept.
first?
Yeah,
Well, I mean, again, I don't mean to answer for you, but I don't think they do repairs outside the bay.
Okay,
No.
okay.
Number
Yeah,
one.
all our services are handled within the bays. We don't do any type of work outside of the bay.
Okay, but in terms of, let's say, a broken truck comes in, do you service stuff like that sits in the parking lot a little bit before it gets serviced in the bay? Or is it all cash and carry, kind of drive in, drive out?
So as typically when we get any type of services, we typically work on it that day. I mean, we don't have,
John, we can pick you up, if you're going to have a conversation sidebar, it's going to, yep.
yeah, so we don't, typically we don't have vehicles stay overnight or sitting on the parking lot to where oils or anything would leak onto the parking lot.
Okay, but is there employee training to that effect and cleanup hazmat stuff that's available at the facility and things like that in case there is?
I believe there is, yes, sir.
Okay, can we make sure that happens somehow? I mean, that's, as these gentlemen have thankfully pointed out, my history here, we're tired of getting burned, quite frankly. We think what we've been advised by some of our neighbors is that it really helps to have a policy and equipment available and training for all the employees, because what'll happen is the sewer drain will take a little too long to run out, so what they'll do is they'll just push it past the sewer drain into the parking area, and you'll know nothing about it as managers or owners of the organization. And so those are the kinds of things, the unintentional things that we're trying to prevent, because whatever mistakes you guys make, we have to live with, and it costs us money to do that, and we don't have a lot of money. So we very much like to try and to have that discussion and jointly work out a mutual arrangement so that we can kind of like do what's best for both organizations. Okay, so I'll give John my number and stuff.
Okay.
And make sure that he has my card,
Okay,
so that if there's anything that we can do, we'd like to participate as a neighborhood.
Okay. of course.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience that would care to speak? All right. Do you have anything in closing, or?
I do not. Paula, thank you very much. Well done, and thank you very much, Mr. Allen, for your concerns as well. We'll do our best to address all of those things.
All right.
Thank you.
As I stated with the first case, the filing deadline for anything going further would be the 22nd of this month. Is the Planning Commission hearing changed in December, or did I dream that?
Let me tell you.
I don't
real
think I
quick.
dreamed it because I think it gets around Christmas. So
does.
Paula
I just
told
wanted to
me
make
it's
sure a
December
note.
20th is what I think.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Well, and also bumps into fiscal court meeting on the 21st, so I do believe it's the 20th, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe that's right. So I
On a
forgot to.
On a Monday, not on a Tuesday.
Yeah, so I forgot to say that after the first case, so in case anybody's watching that planning commission hearing, if either of these cases
sorry,
do
just looking-
choose to go forward,
I was looking at the wrong month, sorry.
I think the 20th.
That's, we did change it, we got to get back to it because
Yeah. We'll let you know. But
That's
it is
fine.
different.
the
It's-
19th would be the normal date. No, the 26th would be the normal date. That's right after Christmas. Yeah, let's just get back on what
Yeah.
the schedule is.
So,
We'll try our hardest to get filed for the December hearing. That'll
So-
be our goal.
and same as the first case, if anybody was notified of this as an adjoining property owner, they will be notified as well. So with that being said, that'll conclude the meeting at 1:47. Thank you.
Thank you all.